I turn around on the phone and realize that my tiny little daughter is unpacking the trash can for the benefit of the Labrador Retriever, who is delighted. And my tiny little son has opened the refrigerator door because he'd like to see what happens if he pees into the vegetable bin. And so, and I don't remember where my husband was. He might have been doing a play out of town or you know, something, but he was not in the room at the time. And I remember just that moment going, okay, this is probably about as whacked out as it's going to be for a while. So,
you're listening to The Other 50%, her story of Hollywood. I'm Julie Harris Walker. This week I caught up with Janet Graham Borba. Now, Janet is a senior vice president of physical production at HBO, where she oversees film, series, and miniseries, and most notably Game of Thrones. Now, we met in a cafe, so there's a lot of outdoor noise and a guy coughing and some people laughing, so forgive us that, but I think it's worth it for the interview. Janet and her daughter had just come from their mother-daughter book club that they've been going to for, 6 to 8 years now, and she pulled out a book, We Are All Feminists, is what they were talking about at the book club. So this is a very, very timely day for her to have this interview. Anyway, she was very generous to join me at this cafe, and here was our conversation. Is that what you always wanted to do? Is that what you thought you'd be doing?
you know, what I thought I would be doing has changed many times in my life. I went to college thinking I was going to medical school. That was clearly not my path. Those were not my people. And then the place where I went to college didn't have any sort of film school. There was some...
Where did you go?
I went to the University of Virginia. And so at the time, now there's a big media studies program, but back then there were some film history classes, but nothing that was about... And I didn't know any actual humans that worked in film and TV. So I went into other work for a long time and then went to grad school at USC in the START program, producing program. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, step by step, here I am. So I've been at HBO for a long time, 20 years.
Oh, my Lord.
I know,
okay,
right?
So what was your path to get there?
To get HBO?
Like, how did you start out in this business?
Oh, I was in film school. And like everybody else in film school, I interned for a few different people, and one of those internships by introduction led me to this spectacularly lovely comedy director, a guy called Jim Abrams, who was about to start a movie and was looking for an assistant. And so my first job in the business, my first day on the job, we were scouting locations in Sandusky, Ohio. And I was still in school.
As you do.
Exactly. I didn't know what you did on a location scout, so I thought if I had a pen and a camera, I was probably pretty close. And that worked out well. So, and I worked with him for probably about 3 years, and then went to work for and with another producer who had a deal at Disney, a guy called Michael Pizer, lovely, lovely man, and we got super busy, so I got to begin producing before I really should have, because I just didn't know much. But the last of those projects was something we had developed together called Hackers. And I had stayed in London to finish that. He'd come back and his deal with Disney was over. So I came back at the end of Hackers with no job and was starting to look around, and I interviewed to produce something at HBO that I didn't get hired for and didn't get made. And that didn't happen, but then I got a phone call saying, would you consider coming on staff? And I thought, I don't think so.
That sounds terrible.
That doesn't sound like such a good idea. I really liked being on set, and I really liked the immersion of getting something made. But I was looking at a point in time where all the things that I had been working on developing were had gotten made because we had such a nice run, and the notion of another 2 years of eating lunch with agents and reading bad drafts of script while I waited for something else to be ready was a little daunting. And I had been on location or in production for a couple of years, and my stuff was in storage, and I didn't remember any of my friends' phone numbers, and this was in the day when you had to remember your friends' phone numbers. You didn't have
before
to anymore, but then
phones.
You did.
You were a migrant film worker?
Exactly. And so I thought, it wouldn't be such a bad idea to sit still for a minute and see how it works inside a studio and work with more than one filmmaker in a given year and sort of see what that is. It'll make me a better producer. So I said, well, I'll come and I'll stay for a year. And 1 year became 20.
So it worked out.
So it worked out well. Partly because the quality of the material that I get to work on is so incredibly high.
Well, it's HBO.
It's HBO.
Hello.
And lovely, lovely team of colleagues, which has, changed and evolved over 20 years, as it should.
Although there's a lot that stays the same there.
There's a lot of continuity. Yeah.
For sure. And then somewhere along the line you got married and had babies.
Well, what happened is pretty soon, actually right before I took the HBO job, I met the man who is now my husband. And he is a freelance person, an actor, a theater director, and he now also runs a theater company in the summers on the East Coast. So it also began to feel, as our relationship solidified and we wanted to have a family, it felt like one freelancer is about the correct number in a couple. And
two seems hard.
Two seems like it would be hard. And I was loving my work. And so that crystallized, I suppose, as we got married and started a family, that I would be that person in the relationship.
So you knew going in.
But and I never sort of made along the way there was never any forbidding me to go back out freelance or to go take another job or take a different kind of risk, but it just has never made sense.
And then you had your babies.
And then I had the twins, and HBO is, as you will remember, incredibly family friendly.
I had three babies while I was there. While
you were there, so people expect you to be where it's important for you to be and to get your work done. And but for the most part, in most departments, are pretty relaxed about how that happens. And
which is nice.
There's no crisis that you can't be reached at 2:00 because you're at the orthodontist, because you can be reached at 2:45 and that will be fine.
Right.
And people tend to treat that in a calm way. So,
have you worked out the division of labor at your house?
Well, I'm incredibly lucky because I have a husband who is a full parenting partner, and is in lots of ways a far better parent than I will ever be. A little less type A, a little better listener. So that's great. And so he's a full participant in their lives. I think like most couples I know, though, probably for reasons of my being a production person and his being an artistic person, and probably also because, I'm my own kind of control freak and I want to know everything's done and manage how it's done. A lot of the family management lands on me, or has been chosen by me. I'm never quite sure how much of it is my own damn fault.
Right. Because you have the list in your head.
I have the list in my head, and I'm the production person, and I sit at a desk all day with an assistant. I can be found. The systems and files and whatever it takes to get that stuff done are easy for me. And he's in and out of a rehearsal room or an audition room or on the road to one or the other, and so it's less easy for him. But it lands on me for whatever reason.
But he can take them to the appointment.
Absolutely,
and you can make
and
the
often does.
Yeah.
And often does. So we divide that stuff up that way. Household-wise, we're lucky. I have a nice corporate job, so we've always been able to have enough help that there wasn't a huge, it's not, we can have somebody who cleans the house on Fridays, which means we're not fighting over who's got to go fold the thing of laundry. We're very lucky.
Makes all the difference.
Makes all the difference. And when the kids were little, we had to have, but also were able to have somebody that helped with that. Who I miss desperately every single day of my life.
Me too.
She's fantastic. Fantastic woman. And it's all been relatively benign. I'm sure my mother used to say that in a marriage, everybody thinks they're doing 110% of everything. And I definitely have my moments where I think, why is this all on me?
Right.
Why am I the only one who knows this, organizes this, does this on time? Whatever. There must be things where he feels the same way. Why am I the only one who knows how to hook up the internet?
Should we get him on the phone right now?
We totally can. Because definitely he's the only one who can hook up the internet. We're training a puppy right now. He is the only one who can manage that puppy.
And thank God.
And thank God.
Thank God he's doing it.
Yes, indeed. So, I don't know. It never feels equal, but again, I'm not sure it feels equal to him. So,
that's fair.
Yeah.
Did you have a mentor?
At different points in time, I would say I have had mentors who were usually my bosses or my boss's bosses, who I felt like were helping me along. But no one person all along, for sure.
Do you mentor anyone?
I teach now at USC in the start producing program. So in that sense, yes. And that there are 24 young people that I teach for a semester and then stay roughly in their lives, often for a long time after. But not in a formal way, more in an I'm here, let's talk kind of way.
Yeah. Now, what is that job on top of your current job? How much of a commitment is that?
It's not, the reason it's possible is because it is a single course taught only in the fall semester. And in the STARK program, the classes are at night in the second year. So I teach one long evening a week in the fall semester, which is August to December. And then there are papers to grade and curriculum to create and all of that. But that's the level of it. But I've been doing it for a long time now, 7 or 8 years, 10 years, long time.
Wow. So you're not starting from scratch when you're doing it?
No. I don't. I have to calibrate or adjust the syllabus every year, but I don't have to start from scratch.
Now, you hire a lot of people in your position, a lot of freelancers. Do you find there's a difference when you're hiring men versus hiring women in how they advocate for themselves?
There's a difference. I'm just thinking in different job categories. With producers, when I'm hiring producers, there is certainly less. I don't know why I feel the desire to be polite about this. I won't by the end of our conversation. But there's certainly less ego coming from female producers, and less of a sense of entitlement to whatever the benefits of their employment might be than there is from men.
Does that translate into also less negotiating?
Not necessarily. Because I've certainly, my toughest negotiation with a line producer actually was with a pretty high-end woman producer, where I thought the asks were too high and it took a very long time and a lot of detailed negotiating. So it wasn't about that. And to a certain extent, I was impressed by the desire not to, even with sort of less ego in the equation, to not give in on details where her male counterparts might or might not have. So the other thing that's interesting is once a woman's made her deal, generally speaking, you're done. If I've made a very tough deal with a male producer, I'm often hearing about it the entire show. And that's not true with the women. They're like, okay, we're done. Made that deal. Let's go.
Make your deal and stop complaining about it.
Yeah.
Interesting. Are they trying to get a better deal halfway through and renegotiate, or they just want you to know that they're doing you a big favor?
I think the latter.
Yeah.
Because I think people know that, a closed deal is a closed deal. Yeah, I think the latter.
Is it equitable as far as men and women as department heads across the board, or do you find some positions are more female, some positions are more male?
I think there is a definite, there are certain jobs that skew one way or the other. Most production designers are men, but not all. Most costume designers are women, but not all. Editors, probably more men than women, but I've worked with, obviously with both. Accountants, it's pretty evenly split. I'm trying to think what other department heads. Once you get into kind of grips and electricians and camera departments, those are almost entirely male. Some of that, I think, is the perception, and correct perception, that a lot of that stuff is hauling gear. But cinematographers and directors should be much more highly feminized job categories than they are. Much more. Should be. Because that's about eye and creativity, and too few women. Too few women's eyes.
What do you think we need to do to get there? Are there not enough women doing that job?
There are definitely not enough women, in my experience, doing the job of being cinematographers or trying to get there. It's changing, but it's changing very gradually in that particular category. With directors, I think the problem is access at the DGA did a study, and I'll have the numbers wrong, but a study, because they were trying to figure out what's the problem, because everybody will say, I would hire more women, but they're not
if there were
there. You know, there are so few women who have any seasoning at all, any credits, any accomplishment as a director, that I don't have anybody to look at for a job that's big and expensive and whatever. So the DGA went back and looked at the points of entry. So the jobs at which you are hiring somebody who has no credits, entry level, mostly television jobs. Mm-hmm. So you're hiring a director who's never done anything but their student film, and or a reel they've done themselves, and been hired to direct until that moment. And 93% of those jobs are going to men. So that's at the point of entry.
Right.
So then you have 93% of the people who have one credit are men.
Right.
And then it becomes it pyramids up.
And there was that interview, or maybe it was the New York Times article, where they were talking about a man can win Sundance and his next movie is a $200 million superhero movie.
Right.
And that doesn't happen for a woman. They don't get that opportunity.
Correct.
But are the same number of them coming out of film school?
I think the numbers in terms of film school classes are getting pretty equal.
Yeah.
Certainly it's true in the producing program. I think I had more women than men the last 2 years at the START program. But when I went there, because I got my master's in that same program, it was 21 people in the class, 3 women.
Wow. So there's progress.
There's progress.
So is it still seen as very risky to hire a female first-time director?
I think so, and I think it's 2 things. I think it's that women, not always, but I think sometimes women are drawn to softer material, to material that doesn't read instantly as being as commercial. They're drawn less to, more to relationship pieces and less to suspense or action or any of the things where somebody might look at that and go, oh, I see something there in terms of somebody's ability to execute the big money pictures, which are action, adventure, superhero, whatever. So there may be some of that is a matter of the taste of the people doing the work, and what the reel looks like. If you're looking at, okay, what kinds of things is this director skillful at, that women are choosing material that's less commercial. I do think that's happening.
Yeah.
It was really interesting at the DGA Awards for Best First Director. Mari Heller, who just won the Spirit Award yesterday for Best First Feature, and who is just a kick-ass, fabulous young woman, directed Diary of a Teenage Girl, and her real there were other competitors in the category, but the person who won made Ex Machina, which is a little bit more, a sci-fi suspense and more. Anyway, there's a taste question, maybe, and what people are spending big money on in the feature world. If it's about that, is the superhero movie. That said, there's an awful lot of television and features, but more television that is relationship driven.
Yeah,
and so.
And
should be drawing women.
That makes me wonder that probably also the level of people doing the green lighting are choosing the superhero movies.
Well, that would be the other thing, which is I think that the people who are doing the hiring of directors are often men, and they are hiring people who feel like themselves.
Yeah.
Because it's comfortable.
Right. So how do you break that up?
Not sure. More women executives.
Yeah. Now going back to the top of show across films, are your top of show levels the same across the categories? Like is a more male dominated category, does it have the same top of show as a more traditionally female position?
Oh, that's interesting. No, actually. Part of it is union, and part of it is, well, in terms of department heads, our highest top of show rate would be for cinematographers, and some of that is driven by the union. Right. Our costume designer top of show is a tiny bit lower than our production design top of show. So it doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman in either job, but costume designers tend to be more female than male. But you're also managing a smaller department with a smaller budget. It has historically been slightly smaller job.
Yeah.
Editors, again, it's driven much more by union minimums, because that's IA, but again, it's not gender specific, it's job specific.
So the union's probably helpful in that regard.
Very much so.
And it's probably hard to discern because there is always a reason when there's pay inequity.
Yes.
There's always a totally legit reason why it is.
Yeah.
So it's hard to pinpoint, like, is it a gender thing or is it just because it's a different job?
Right. That's interesting. I'd never thought about that quite that way.
Let's look at the data, shall we? Do you consider yourself a success?
Oh, goodness. I don't know. On a good, highly self-confident day, absolutely. On other days, I think you only see what you haven't done or what you could be doing better or what you let get away in some fashion. So, it's definitely mood dependent, my own sense of my own success. But I think mostly yes.
Are you a badass?
No, I don't think so.
What does it mean?
Badass meaning, I don't know. I think I associate that with a certain amount of swagger more than anything else, and I'm not sure I'm a swaggerer. Once in a while, but
You're not swaggy?
not so much.
In the course of your career, have you had to make a conscious effort to modify your communication style to be effective?
Yes, but not in a way that's gender-based. I think as my career as time has gone by and I've sort of climbed whatever ranks I have climbed, you definitely have to develop the ability to distill information and to deliver it in a super clear way with the priority baked into the issue and what you need from the person you're communicating with also clearly laid out. And I think that's something I've gotten a lot better at over time.
How'd you learn how to do that?
Just practice and prep.
Yeah.
There are certain meetings or conversations that I prep for a lot, and others that I just don't need to anymore because I've been doing it a long time. But certain conversations you prep, and then I write often what needs to be said so that I can, what's that old saying about this letter would have been much more brief, but I didn't have time. Can't remember whose quote that is.
That's a good one.
But where you, where you can distill it down, but you can't distill it down until you put all the detail in and then go, okay, they don't need to know this, 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 and this. I can say it this way and it will be clear.
Yeah.
So.
Do you feel like in your profession, whether it's at your company or not, do you feel a glass ceiling?
Yes. I'd have to say yes.
What does it look like?
Well, it looks like the fact that the chairman of our company, the head of programming, the president of series, the president of miniseries, and the president of films, my boss, who's the EVP of production, those are all men. Every one of them. Every single one of them. And the women who have risen pretty high up in the kind of creative side of the company are all gone. There are still women climbing those ranks and doing creative work, but it's not highly feminized at the top. Yeah. So the reason it feels like there's a glass ceiling is because there's a certain point above which there are not any women.
Yeah. And it doesn't feel like there will be?
Not for a good while, no.
Because there's a pretty... my perception of HBO is there's a very solid next level of female
of women, female executives. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. What do you think it would take to break that open?
I don't know. Whether it would just take sort of the right personality, kind of cracking it open. And historically, the number 2 person in films has always been a woman, and a strong and capable woman, but and not the same woman. That's changed over time. I'm not sure. I think whether it takes a specific personality that kind of changes that once and then it stays changed, I'm not sure.
Can you put your finger on, at that top level, what is the behavior or what is the personality trait or what does it take to be there? What is the difference?
I'm not sure I understand the question. I think it takes a really high level of effectiveness, and a really high level of kind of the trust of one's colleagues, I suppose. And I don't know, I don't work on the creative side. I work with everybody on the creative side. On the production side, I think now it's just sort of a matter of fact. My boss is a man who is younger than I am, so
then it's just succession planning.
Then it's succession planning, and I'm older now. So,
do you think it's a matter of confidence?
Sure.
It's hard to put your finger on what exactly
what the quality
is.
I think certainly it's confidence. Certainly it's that's his confidence, effectiveness, a real kind of dauntless passion for whatever it is you're doing. Because I do think, a lot of the things that I've lost her name, Cheryl something, the woman from
Sandberg
from Facebook, talks about, which is women sort of hedging their bets at all, holding themselves back because either they're appropriately distracted by family concerns, or they think someday they may want to step out, or they're not all in.
Right. Or waiting for permission.
Waiting to be chosen. All those things about how a job description comes up and a man sees that he's got 3 of the 5 necessary qualities and he thinks, I can do that job. And a woman says she's got, 4.5 of those qualities and she feels she needs to point out that other thing she doesn't have.
Exactly.
Interestingly, we were just reading in the Mother-Daughter book club, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, We Should All Be Feminists, with all these 15-year-old girls, which is just about the ways in which feminism manifests today for 15-year-olds and then for their 40 and 50-something mothers.
Okay. What does it say?
And she is also African. And so some of it is cultural differences around gender issues. But a lot of it is just, why should it be that as a woman this is true, whereas for a man this is true? A lot of things you've already called attention to. Money. Why isn't it equal pay? Why aren't there equal opportunities all the way up? But in the process of that, the girls were bringing up different things that had occurred to them. There's so much education for young women about rape, college campus rape, and sexual assault, and how one defends oneself, and trying to distinguish between practical behaviors that make you safer in the world and not judging other women who happen to have gone to a party in a short skirt and had a drink.
Right.
Why should there be any blame associated with that at all? And but then there was also a piece that's up, I think it's actually some hair product, Pantene maybe, made this thing called Sorry, which is about how often women say sorry.
Yeah.
Have you seen it?
Yes, it's perfect.
It's genius. I have
sorry,
not seen
I'm
it.
just going to say that,
right.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Sorry, do you have a minute? As opposed to saying, good morning.
Right.
Do you have a minute? Right. Like this need to apologize for being
our
present
existence.
Or interrupting or taking a seat or taking a little too much space.
Yeah. I wonder if, it occurred to me as you were talking, to get to that highest level.
You can't be apologizing.
You can't be apologizing, but I think, and I'm just theorizing here, I think it is in the personality, because the data shows, and Sheryl Sandberg talks about, as a woman you still have to be liked. So you have to be assertive and competent and bold and likable as hell as you're doing it in order to get there. And that's tricky.
Super tricky. And many of the men in very senior positions in lots of companies are many, many things, likable not being amongst them.
It's not even a criteria.
No, very true.
Yeah.
I think about it in terms of the presidential election a lot right now.
Yeah. Not to put too fine a point on it, but Hillary is 10 times more qualified than anybody in the field. And yet they are still absolutely in the running, having no qualifications whatsoever.
Right.
It's amazing. And I know as controversial as I guess she is, I don't think she is, but it almost feels like, if not now, when is going to be the next time someone is so qualified to get there? We're going to have to wait another 20 years, unless Elizabeth Warren jumps in there. Like, if not now, when?
Right.
Honestly.
Well, and then the craziness that, crazy kind of popularity contest that politics can be anyway, but it does feel awful.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we shall see how serious the circus is.
Yes.
I got to think at some point, Trump would be like, I was kidding. Like, I never meant for it to go this far.
I would have thought that would have happened by now.
Yes.
And the fact that it hasn't. And then, we're all just going to have to get much more involved.
Yeah. It's astounding. Do you think you make as much money as your male colleagues?
I have wondered. There were a couple of moments where I asked that question, but I was able to ask it without asking it that way by saying, we have newer people joining the department. I need your absolute word that I am not being paid less than newcomers to the same job, and was assured that I was not. So I think not, but I don't know.
But one may never know.
But one will never know.
Has this business changed since you got into it? Or how has this business changed since you got in?
Well, it's changed in a million sort of both technological ways and kind of format and distribution ways, right? So specifically as it affects HBO's business, simple transitions, from film to digital, and from things made more in camera to things made with more post work, more computer graphics and whatever, visual effects. Certainly the way the work gets done has changed in that way. It is more feminized than it used to be. Crews are more mixed up than they used to be.
When you say more feminized, what do you mean by
Meaning
that?
more women on crews than there used to be. Although that comes and goes and is sometimes specific to a particular crew, it's still very hard to find enough people of color and different background to bring into your team. Very hard to find them. So it's changed in that way. And now it's changed in that, the kinds of things you can make have changed. And then the number of people trying to do the same things we're trying to do has changed.
Well, there's a lot more in your space.
So there's a ton more competition for the people we want to be working with, and it's much harder to, So in that way, it's a bigger canvas.
That's what you get when you set the bar, and then everyone chases it.
Yeah. There are different points in time when I have felt like the issue of female leadership has been more or less on my mind. And this is one of those times when it definitely is.
It's everywhere at this moment, definitely. It feels like.
Yeah.
I remember reading that New York Times article, but my thought was, the women, they're mad as hell and they're not going to take it anymore. It was so transparent. Like, we're going to call it out, like, enough already.
Right.
I was like, finally, let's do it. What do you think the next steps are?
Well, I do think that the notion that I think more women have to be supporting more women, and have to be using their voices to get more women hired, and have to figure out how to, pull more women into the work and promote the work of those women. I think we all have to be examining our own biases. I just think the fact that you're having this conversation on a Sunday afternoon, and I've just come from a book club that was about feminine,
it's out there.
It's out there.
How do we pull men in? How do we make it an imperative for men to bring in women? What's in it for them?
I don't know.
And this is, in my opinion, why the women's movement isn't done.
Right.
I think we didn't include men in the 70s. And now I think we have to figure out how to include them.
I mean, you can make men interested in it in service of their daughters' lives. You can make men interested in equality as a matter of fairness. You can make men interested in a woman candidate for a job that you are able to advocate for. You can promote yourself. You can try to feel, stop saying sorry, try to feel confident in the room. Ask for the money you're entitled to earn.
Sit at the table.
Sit at the table. Lean in, to steal Cheryl's phrases. You can do all those things. You can, as producers will say, proceed with confidence.
Yes. The data shows, Forbes did a bunch of articles showing that companies' bottom line is better when there are women on the board of directors. Just having women there makes a company more profitable.
Interesting.
And I'm not sure men believe it.
We did a thing a couple of years ago. There was like a training where they divided us into groups, and it was, I want to say it was senior vice presidents and above across a bunch of different Time Warner divisions, and so I think 5 tables of 5, and so what's that? It's 5 tables of 5 would be 25, but maybe it was more than that. Maybe there were 30 executives with that. Maybe 4 women, 5 women in the room, a couple of whom were from HR who were learning the training so that they could bring it on. So fewer than that in terms of numbers of women doing and I'm not diminishing what HR work is, but in terms of people who were, anyway,
leading the
you
company.
Take my point. And so there was one woman, no more than one woman at every table, and 4, 5, 6 men. And so I sat down for the first day of this, and you did iterations of the model of a company, and my table happened to be, it was a lovely group of guys, but there were a lot of them from sports and from advertising, so quite male and quite loud.
Mad Men.
Right. And so we got to a certain point, and they feed you some data, and you're supposed to decide how your company would handle that data, and then they plug that into the model, and you get the next iteration of your company, and the goal is to be the most profitable or have your stock at the highest value. I can't remember exactly what the metric was, but to grow your business in a way that was better than how all the other tables did based on your decisions with this different, and your choices with different things you would do with your company. And there was one point on day one where this thing came up that the model was asking for, and I went to my mom place and said, oh, you guys, in this model, this is a teaching moment. This is a teaching moment, and it wants us to have learned that X should be valued, so we need to do this again. And they're like, no. And I got totally talked down, and then we it became clear in day 2 that was in fact the case, and that the tables that had made that choice had better information that allowed them. Anyway, we came in second, and I'm convinced that if I had spoken up in a more insistent way, or if they had listened in a more open way, we would have done better. But I went home that first day completely jangled, because I don't work all day in an environment where people are talking over each other and where it's all macho and sports and whatever. And I went home and went, I'm not sure I can do this the second day. I'm completely overstimulated and in a not comfortable way. But then I sort of got a good night's sleep and went back the second day, and we did very well. And it was a great experience for me about, okay, there's a whole lot of different ways of looking at business than the one I use every day, because these guys actually, everybody's looking at a different piece of the business and doing really well in these different ways. But it also made me realize, people aren't listening, and I'm not speaking up forcefully enough. And how many other places in my work life might that be true? Don't know.
Interesting.
And that mom skills actually have value, because
yes,
you're like, oh right, this is where we strategize this way.
Yes. I'm surprised that a guy didn't hear you and repeat it and pretend it was his idea, because then they all could have heard it.
Well, there is that. But one of the big bonding moments was actually on the second day when one of the guys at the table, who had a working wife who was away on a business trip, the nanny had gotten sick, and he was trying to rearrange carpool for his 2 children, off on the, stepping aside on his cell phone, rearranging carpool for his 2 children so he could continue to take part in the study.
How refreshing.
Which felt very refreshing, but then I thought I wouldn't have thought twice had he been a woman.
Right.
But it
no,
seemed,
he gets kudos. What a wonderful
gets
father.
Kudos, right.
Oh, bonus points.
Father. Right.
But you would be, she's distracted. She's not really here. It's,
right. She doesn't have her home life organized properly.
Yeah. Get it together.
Get it together. I also had a huge amount of admiration for his wife. I'm like, oh my God, she left town and he's got it.
That's great. Do you find it different working with men who have stay-at-home wives than working with men who have working wives?
Yes. Now I'm trying to think, though, because most of the men I work with have stay-at-home wives. So the comparison I'm always drawing is the comparison between being a working wife and mother and there having somebody who's covered everything else, as opposed to between a man with and a man without a stay-at-home wife. And I'm just trying to think of some examples. Thinking. Yeah, almost every man I work with has a stay-at-home wife.
Then how does that affect their ability to do the job?
I think it's got to be incredibly liberating.
Right?
Incredibly liberating.
They can stay late?
They could stay late. They could, just the not having to have the list in your head because somebody else has got the list. It does look incredibly civilized.
Yeah.
You know,
something to be said.
Something to be said.
Spouse.
Yeah. And then I think, okay, but we could do that. We could all hire somebody who's going to be that extra person for us, but not if you also want to be paying tuition for your children and, there's only so many dollars at the end of the day.
Exactly. It's a lot.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to yourself if you could talk to your 20-year-old self?
Oh, my 20-year-old self is so different from who I am now, though. What advice would I give? I would say work on the things that make you more confident and don't be, walk away from timidity at every possible opportunity. Probably that.
Then what do you tell your daughter?
I don't have to because she's the least timid person I know. She's actually got her head wrapped around it in a pretty cool way. Partly because in her generation, so many of the things that, it's just progress, right?
Right.
The complete comfort in their group of young people about issues of sexuality, international origin, they're just...
Gender, race.
All of those things. Just so much more relaxed about that stuff. And in terms of issues of feminism, she's still young, but is, very, very nearly the best student in her class. And so that not approaching her work with any timidity at all. I think that happens for women. I'm not sure when. But definitely for me, it was much more in the college and right after college when the world just suddenly got very big. I found that time very difficult as a woman. And it was a point when men were just really getting traction, if that made any sense, as you left the academic world. That was a tough time, I think.
At some point we start waiting for permission.
Right.
And it happens somewhere.
Yeah, and it doesn't happen
there.
It didn't happen in school for me, and it doesn't happen in school for her.
And what about your son?
In terms of what? So,
Feminism.
What advice would I give him about feminism? He's he's grown up with a twin sister. He's never ever not been in the company of a strong female force. Mm-hmm. You try to teach respect and kindness and tolerance and generosity in all aspects. Because he's a twin, he would be shocked, I think, at any ongoing lack of parity, because there's always been parity in his life.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure. I'll have to think about that.
That's such an interesting perspective of him being a twin.
Yeah.
With a sister. It's tricky, because I just assume in my life, my boy's going to be fine, because men somehow know they just go out and rule the world. So I really focus on, teaching my daughters to go out and rule the world.
Right.
But I wonder, does it ever get so far that the boys don't realize they also should go out there and do that.
And do that. Well, it's interesting. Have you read this book called Between the World and Me?
No.
Ta-Nehisi Coates. It's about being black in America, but a lot of the issues are the same. He's talking about how, and it's, I think, there was a very similar example in one of the pieces we were looking at in book club today, where little girls are taught, keep yourself safe, be polite, do ease, and boys are taught go out and play.
Yeah.
They're not given sort of lessons about you must do this or you must do that or you must do that, you must dress this way, you must whatever. Boys are just go. And he was talking about in his book that in growing up in the city, young black boys are taught, to be exactly the same stuff. Be polite, whatever, and little white kids.
How to behave when you get pulled over. Have your hands on the steering wheel. Say you're reaching in your pocket.
But he's talking about little kids, like when it starts, that little black children are taught to be polite and to step aside and to not make trouble, and small white children are taught to ride their tricycle down the sidewalk.
Yeah. Interesting.
Go out, it's your world.
I found with parent-teacher conferences at school, and I actually questioned one of the teachers about their unconscious gender bias, because my son and daughter are 18 months apart, same teachers going through, right? So the 1 year, the teacher for my daughter, it was all about the content of her writing and her work in the classroom and how she thinks and how she expresses herself. The next year, same teacher, same grades, same content of work, but my son, the entire conversation was about his handwriting and his talking to his neighbors. And I was like, she kind of, at the end of the conference, I felt like he'd been kind of beat up a little bit, because we only talked about the negative things in his not acting like a girl in the class,
right,
and his messy handwriting. And I kept trying to bring it back to, but what about the essay? What about the points
Was he with
made?
you, your son?
Yeah, and he kind of brushed it all off, like whatever. And a couple times I said, and those are good leadership qualities, what she's describing right now. And then this year he has a male teacher, and suddenly it was all about the content of his essay. And so I told him how much I appreciated that we were going to talk about the content of his work, and I asked Charlie if he felt it was different. He was like, yeah, that was a much more interesting. It's better feedback.
And how old is he?
Now he's 9.
I do think there is, a classroom of little girls is much easier to control.
For sure.
And
a birthday party of little girls is easier to control.
I remember having this period of time where I thought, I can't get him to sit down to eat.
Yeah.
It's like,
he still doesn't sit to eat.
It was about that age, maybe. And a friend or a therapist or somebody I was talking to basically said, I wouldn't worry about that. I would just not let that bother you. What difference does it make if he stands up while he eats?
Yeah.
And for me, I had been raised in a household where everybody sat at the table and we had a conversation, and there was a much more rigid time, but I remember that actually quite fondly, and having derived a lot of kind of sense of family security from being seated at that table in conversation at 6 o'clock every night for 17 years, and in trying to replicate that, but with a smaller family and slightly more chaotic lifestyle.
And I always worry he's going to be 20 years old and can't sit at the table at a restaurant. And that's not going to happen.
I have a friend who says just when you can't take it anymore, you don't have to.
It changes.
Right.
Exactly.
So, but interesting, I do think it's, classroom skills in the early days are about girls. And then it becomes about the leadership qualities that historically have belonged to boys, which now we want our girls to have. So,
thank you so much for doing this.
No, this was a pleasure.
You've been listening to The Other 50%. I'm Julie Harris Walker. I want to thank Janet Graham Borba for sharing her story with us. And special thanks to Jonathan Lucas for editing, Jay Rowe, Danny Rosner, and Allison McQuaid for the music. Please find us on iTunes and subscribe and leave a review, and on our website, theother50%.com, all spelled out, for added features and bios of our guests. Thanks for listening. See you next time.